chosen ones. There's a war happening right now that nobody talks about. Not the kind you see on television, not the kind with armies and borders. This war is invisible, silent. It's been raging against you since before you could walk, and the people fighting it, they're the ones who smiled at family dinners, the ones who said they loved you, the ones who underestimated everything you are. Right now, somewhere in the darkness, someone is discovering they made the worst mistake of their entire existence. They looked at you and saw softness. They saw vulnerability. They saw an opportunity. What they didn't see was the force of nature standing before them. What they couldn't comprehend was that you weren't the victim in this story. You were never the victim. They judged a book by its cover. And that book? It contained information that could have saved their life. This is about what happens when jealousy turns to obsession, when obsession turns to action, when action turns to warfare, and when warfare backfires so catastrophically that the attackers become the casualties of their own hatred. You're about to understand why everything that's been happening to you wasn't random, why you felt things you couldn't explain, why your life seemed harder than it should have been, and why, despite everything thrown at you, you're still standing while they're falling apart. Let me tell you a story. Your story. Why you're born different, not in the way people casually say it, actually different. There was something about your energy that people noticed before you even understood what energy meant. Some people were drawn to it. They wanted to be near you. They felt better in your presence. But others felt threatened. From childhood, there were people in your bloodline who saw you as a problem. They watched you with eyes that held something cold behind the warmth, something calculating. You were too young to understand it then. You just knew something felt wrong. These people made plans. They had conversations about you when you weren't in the room. They worked together, collaborated, strategized, not about how to help you grow, about how to stop you from becoming what you were meant to be. They didn't want you speaking certain truths. They didn't want you discovering certain gifts. They definitely didn't want you accessing certain opportunities that were meant for you. Financial opportunities, spiritual opportunities, opportunities that would elevate you beyond their reach. So they attacked. Not with fists, not with obvious cruelty, with something far more sinister. They went to practitioners, people who work in darkness, people who manipulate energy for money. They paid for rituals. They paid for hexes. They paid for spiritual warfare designed to destroy you from the inside out. They wanted you confused, depressed, anxious, broken. They wanted you in a mental prison where you'd never discover your power. From childhood until now, they've been relentless, day and night, trying everything, throwing everything they had at you. Dark magic that would have destroyed ordinary people, energy that would have sent most into institutions, attacks that would have killed weaker souls. Some of them even went to places where darkness is concentrated, places where forbidden practices are normal. They didn't just hire local practitioners. They traveled. They sought out the strongest dark workers they could find. They spent money they didn't have. They made promises they couldn't keep, all to ensure your destruction. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what they couldn't have predicted. You weren't ordinary. They looked at you and saw someone soft, someone kind, someone who seemed easy to manipulate. You smiled. You were gentle. You had a good heart. In their twisted logic, that meant weak. This was their fatal error. See, there are forces in this universe that don't care about appearances. There are powers that don't measure strength by aggression. You were connected to something they couldn't see, protected by something they couldn't comprehend. Your ancestors weren't sleeping. The divine wasn't looking away. And you were quietly becoming a master at something they never anticipated, alchemy. While they sent darkness, you were learning to transmute it into light. While they sent chaos, you were learning to transform it into clarity. Every attack they launched became fuel for your evolution. Every curse they paid for became a blessing in disguise. You were doing spiritual work they couldn't even pronounce. They thought you were weak because you weren't loud. They thought you were vulnerable because you weren't cruel. They fundamentally misunderstood what power looks like. Real power doesn't announce itself. Real power doesn't need to perform. Real power simply is, and you are powerful beyond their comprehension. They kept attacking, kept sending practitioners after you, kept working their rituals and their ceremonies. They were so focused on taking you down that they never stopped to ask the important question: why isn't it working? Month after month, year after year, they watched you not just survive but thrive. They watched you heal, they watched you grow, they watched you step into things they tried to block, and it drove them absolutely insane. Because by every calculation, by every spell, by every dark working they paid for, you should have been destroyed, you should have been institutionalized, you should have been exactly where they wanted you. Instead, you kept rising. That's when the fear set in. If this message hits your spirit, hype this video so more chosen ones like you can find it. Here's what happens when you attack someone protected by forces beyond your understanding. Here's what happens when you wage war against someone chosen by the divine. Here's what happens when you underestimate an alchemist. Everything you send comes back. Not in the way people casually talk about karma. In a very real, very immediate, very devastating way. The practitioners they hired started noticing something. The rituals weren't working. Worse than that, they were reversing. The energy was boomeranging. What was meant for you was hitting them. At first, they thought they just needed stronger magic. They went back, paid more money, tried darker rituals, sacrificed more, went deeper into forbidden practices. They were desperate, obsessed. They couldn't accept that you were simply beyond their reach. But with each attempt, the backfire got worse. They started seeing things that weren't there. Or maybe things that were always there but they could finally see them. Entities, shadows, their own darkness taking form. The very demons they tried to send to you came home to roost. Their mental state deteriorated. They couldn't sleep, couldn't think clearly, couldn't find peace. The anxiety became unbearable. The depression became crushing. They were living in the exact prison they built for you. The practitioners they hired eventually refused to work for them. Too risky, too dangerous. The energy around you was too protected. Anyone who came against you was basically signing up for their own destruction. Even people who work in darkness have survival instincts. So now they're stuck, living with the consequences of their own hatred, watching you flourish while they fall apart, seeing you step into your destiny while theirs crumbles. And the worst part, they know it's their fault. They know they did this to themselves. The community around them is noticing. Family members are seeing the change. They're watching these people deteriorate, and they can't understand why. Some of them are having conflicts about what was done, disagreements about whether they should have ever gone after you. The unity they once had is fracturing. Because that's what happens when you build on darkness. Eventually, it collapses. Meanwhile, you were experiencing something they never anticipated. You were discovering who you actually are. Every attack they sent forced you to go deeper, forced you to develop skills, forced you to connect with your intuition in ways you might have ignored if life had been easy. You became a master at reading energy, a master at protecting yourself, a master at transmuting negativity into fuel. You started noticing patterns, started connecting dots, started understanding that the struggles you faced weren't random. There was a coordinated effort behind them, and once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. The truth about your family emerged, the truth about who was involved, the truth about what they'd been doing since you were a child. All the lies, all the manipulation, all the fake smiles hiding real hatred, it all came to light. And you know what? You handled it like the powerful being you are. You didn't collapse. You didn't break. You integrated that knowledge and kept moving. You walked away from what needed to be left behind. You set boundaries with people who deserved none of your energy. You chose yourself in ways that terrified them, because they needed you weak, they needed you confused, they needed you attached to them so they could continue their games. But you evolved past their reach. You became someone they couldn't manipulate anymore, someone they couldn't control, someone they couldn't even understand. You mastered the art of walking away, the art of knowing when something isn't aligned with you, the art of protecting your peace at all costs. These are skills that took them down while elevating you. You're not who they thought you were. You're not who they wanted you to be. You're exactly who you were always meant to become. Can you imagine what it's like for them now? Can you picture it? They're watching you. Still watching. Always watching. Because obsession doesn't just disappear. They're scrolling through your life looking for signs of the misery they ordered. Looking for evidence that their money and their rituals accomplished something. Instead, they see you living well. They see you healing. They see you successful. They see you surrounded by genuine love while their world falls apart. They see you manifesting things they tried to block. They see you speaking truths they tried to silence, and it's destroying them, because now they're dealing with a new kind of terror. The terror of being exposed, the terror of consequences, the terror of divine justice arriving exactly when they thought they'd gotten away with everything. Some of them are having nightmares, vivid, visceral nightmares where everything they did is revealed publicly, where law enforcement gets involved, where their reputation is destroyed, where the life they built on lies crumbles in front of everyone who ever respected them. Some of them are dealing with actual health issues. The stress of living with what they've done is manifesting physically. Their bodies are breaking down under the weight of their own darkness. Some of them want to reach out to you. They want to apologize. They want to make amends. But they can't find the words. How do you apologize for trying to destroy someone's entire life? How do you apologize for dark magic and spiritual warfare? How do you apologize for decades of coordinated attacks? You can't. There's no apology big enough. So they sit in their shame. They sit in their regret. They sit in the knowledge that they created an enemy they could never defeat because that enemy was truth itself. They sit knowing they could have had peace if they'd just left you alone. They shouldn't have judged the book by its cover. The information in it could have saved their life. Here's something they never understood about you. Your power wasn't something they could steal. It wasn't something they could block. It wasn't even something they could comprehend. Your power comes from Source, from the divine, from something so far beyond their rituals and their practitioners and their hatred, that their attempts to access it were laughable. They tried to take your strength. They tried to sacrifice you for it. They tried to drain you of it. They worked with people who claimed they could transfer your energy to them. None of it worked, not even a little bit, because you can't steal what's divinely assigned. You can't block what's cosmically ordained. You can't destroy what's protected by forces that existed before time began. You are a force of nature, a spiritual warrior, a chosen one in the truest sense, not chosen because you're better than others, chosen because you have a specific mission that requires a specific type of strength, the kind of strength that gets refined through fire, the kind of strength that gets proven through trials, the kind of strength that gets revealed through surviving what should have killed you. They thought your kindness was weakness. It wasn't. It was confidence. Confidence that you didn't need to be cruel to be powerful. Confidence that you could extend grace without being a fool. Confidence that you could love without being blind. They thought your gentleness was vulnerability. It wasn't. It was mastery. Mastery over your own energy. Mastery over your reactions. Mastery over the ego that demands you prove yourself to people who don't deserve the proof. They thought your silence was defeat. It wasn't. It was strategy. Strategy that understood some battles aren't worth fighting with words. Strategy that understood the universe has its own way of handling injustice. Strategy that understood your energy was better spent building than defending. Now let me put you onto something real. Destiny Engine. I built this because I was done watching chosen ones get dragged through betrayal, isolation and attacks while their enemies strutted around unchecked. I want to help you accelerate the speed of your divine justice and step fully into your purpose. And the beauty of it, you don't even have to lift a finger. Destiny Engine takes their downfall and flips it into your rise. This isn't another meditation app. It's declassified consciousness technology, the same mind programming tools your enemies once used to install fear, competition and scarcity, re-engineered to restore your sovereignty and align you with the cooperative, upgraded operating framework. It generates personalized sequences mapped to your divine purpose. The hardest thing you'll do is put on headphones, press play, and watch your enemies keep digging their own grave. The collective upgrade is underway. Start your destiny engine for $1 today and turn everything they did to break you into fuel for your rise. Link in the description. Every quality they mocked became your greatest asset. Every trait they tried to exploit became your greatest protection. You turned their weapons into wisdom. Let's talk about how deep this went. Because this wasn't just one person acting alone. This was coordinated, organized, a partnership built on mutual hatred and shared jealousy. They had meetings, they shared information, they pooled resources, they went to practitioners together, they reinforced each other's justifications for why you needed to be stopped. They created an echo chamber where their darkness seemed righteous. This is how evil operates. It rarely works alone. It finds others who share its frequency and builds collective power. It convinces itself that numbers equal validity. If multiple people agree you're the problem, then you must be the problem, right? Wrong. Multiple people can be wrong together. Multiple people can be jealous together. Multiple people can be consumed by darkness together. The number of people attacking you never determined the truth. It just determined the size of the karmic debt they were accumulating, and now that debt is due, their partnership is crumbling. The same way they unified in darkness, they're now fracturing in consequence. They're turning on each other, blaming each other, fighting over who pushed things too far, fighting over who should have stopped things before they reached this point. There's no honor among those who operate from hatred. When the consequences arrive, everyone scrambles to save themselves. The partnership that seemed so strong in aggression reveals itself as pathetically fragile in accountability. You're watching it fall apart. You're watching them consume each other, and you didn't have to do anything except stand in your truth and let divine justice handle the rest. There was something specific they didn't want you to discover, something specific they didn't want you to speak about, something that terrified them so much they were willing to risk everything to keep it hidden. Maybe it was truth about your lineage. Maybe it was truth about what happened in your childhood. Maybe it was truth about financial matters or inheritance. Maybe it was truth about their own darkness and how deep it runs. Whatever it was, they knew that if you ever found out and spoke up, everything would change. Their reputation would be destroyed. Their freedom might be threatened. Their carefully constructed image would shatter. So they attacked your voice. They attacked your confidence. They attacked your memory. They tried to make you doubt your own perception of reality. They tried to convince you that you were crazy for noticing what you noticed. They tried to silence you through fear and confusion. But here's what they didn't count on. Here's what they couldn't have predicted. The truth always finds a way. Always. No matter how much energy you put into suppressing it. No matter how many spells you cast to keep it hidden. No matter how many people you pay to keep it quiet. The truth is a living force. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need help. It just needs time. And time always runs out for liars. You're discovering things now. Things are clicking into place. Memories are resurfacing with new context. Situations from your past are making sense in ways they never did before. You're seeing the whole picture. And with that sight comes power. The power to speak. The power to expose. The power to hold people accountable. The power to break generational curses. The power to ensure this pattern stops with you. They're terrified because they know you know. They can see it in your energy. They can feel it in your frequency. You're not the confused child anymore. You're not the manipulated adult anymore. You're awake, aware, armed with knowledge they spent decades trying to keep from you. And there's nothing they can do to put that genie back in the bottle. Let's be direct about something. This often comes down to resources, money, opportunity, position, things they felt entitled to that were actually meant for you. Maybe there was an inheritance they wanted access to. Maybe there were opportunities attached to your name they wanted for themselves. Maybe your very existence threatened their financial stability or social position. So they tried to remove you from the equation. If you were too broken to function, too confused to claim what's yours, too mentally unstable to be taken seriously, then they could move freely. They could take what they wanted without resistance. This is why the attacks were so persistent. This is why they kept going even when nothing worked. There was a material motivation behind the spiritual warfare. Greed wearing the mask of family concern. They acted strategically. They made plans to take advantage of your struggles. They positioned themselves to benefit from your downfall. They even prepared narratives to explain why they deserved what was yours. But you didn't fall down. You didn't stay broken. You didn't give them the opportunity they were manufacturing. Instead, you stood up. You healed. You claimed what's yours with the full authority of someone who earned it through surviving their attempts to destroy you. You accessed the opportunities they tried to block. You stepped into the inheritance they tried to steal. And now they're watching you prosper with resources they counted as theirs. They're watching you build with opportunities they thought they'd have. They're watching the universe provide for you in ways their darkness could never prevent. The karmic justice is poetic. They tried to steal from you and ended up losing what they already had. They tried to block your blessings and ended up blocking their own. They tried to take your position and ended up losing their own standing. Divine mathematics doesn't make mistakes. Let me tell you about the forces that have been guarding you since before you understood you needed guarding. Your ancestors are active, not sleeping, not passive, actively working on your behalf. They've been deflecting attacks, sending warnings, guiding you away from danger, connecting you with people who could help, opening doors your enemies tried to seal. Angels have been assigned to you, specific frequencies designed to match your mission. They've been interfering with plans made against you, confusing your enemies, protecting you in moments when you had no idea you were in danger. The divine itself has invested in your success, because you're not just living for yourself, you're carrying something bigger, a purpose that serves the collective, a light that others need, a frequency that raises the vibration of everyone you encounter. This is why nothing they tried worked. This is why their strongest magic failed. This is why their most expensive practitioners couldn't deliver results. They weren't just fighting you. They were fighting the entire spiritual army assigned to ensure you complete your mission. They never had a chance. They just didn't know it. All that money they spent on darkness was money wasted. All those rituals were rituals destined to fail. All those plans were plans the universe already had contingencies for. They were fighting a battle that was lost before they began. And somewhere deep down they're starting to realize it. They're starting to understand that you're not just some random person they can manipulate. You're protected in ways that make you untouchable. You're covered by forces that make you unstoppable. The shield around you is impenetrable. The protection over you is absolute. The divine investment in you is unconditional. They hate how protected you are, but their hatred changes nothing. Trontobats, here's what really breaks them. Here's what keeps them up at night. Here's what makes them question everything they thought they knew. They're watching you transform into something magnificent. They're watching you embody the very power they tried to steal. They're watching you become everything they feared you'd become. You're not just surviving, you're thriving. You're not just healing, you're mastering. You're not just recovering, you're ascending. Every attack they sent became a lesson you learned. Every curse they paid for became a skill you developed. Every attempt to destroy you became a catalyst for your evolution. You turned their weapons into your wisdom. You transmuted their poison into your medicine. You're a master alchemist now. You can take any energy and transform it. You can face any darkness and find the light within it. You can walk through any storm and come out dancing. They created a monster, not the kind that destroys others, the kind that's so powerful, so protected, so connected to source that it becomes legendary. The kind that people will talk about for generations, the kind that breaks curses and changes timelines. You're that kind of powerful now. They made you that way. Every attack was training. Every betrayal was education. Every moment of darkness was preparation for the light you now carry. They're watching you step into leadership. They're watching you influence others. They're watching you manifest dreams they said were impossible. They're watching you live the life they tried to prevent. And it's killing them, because they know they created this. They know their hatred became your fuel. They know their darkness became your motivation. They know they're watching someone they tried to destroy become absolutely unstoppable. The transformation is complete. You're not who you were. You're who you were always meant to be. Now let me tell you about the moment they realized they were losing. The moment desperation set in. The moment they started making mistakes that would expose everything. They ran out of money paying practitioners who couldn't deliver. The practitioners kept promising results that never came, kept asking for more payment, kept saying they needed stronger rituals, more expensive materials, more time, more energy. The practitioners were bleeding them dry, and they paid because they were obsessed, because they couldn't accept defeat, because admitting you were beyond their reach meant admitting they were wrong about everything. Some of them started trying to do the work themselves. They became homemade practitioners, reading books they didn't understand, performing rituals they weren't qualified to perform, calling on forces they had no business invoking. Trungpa Abhijaya, this made everything worse, because when you do dark work without proper knowledge, without proper protection, without proper grounding, it consumes you. The very entities they were trying to send after you turned their attention to the summoner. They became haunted, oppressed, possessed by the very darkness they were trying to weaponize. Their homes became filled with negative energy. Their lives became chaos. Their mental state became fractured. Now they're seeking help, but nobody wants to touch them. The legitimate spiritual workers can sense the darkness attached to them and refuse to get involved. The dark practitioners know it's a losing battle and won't waste their time. They're stuck in the mess they created with no way out. Some of them are genuinely losing their minds. They can't tell day from night. They're seeing things constantly, hearing things, feeling things. The line between reality and their own darkness has blurred beyond recognition. They're terrified of their own homes, terrified of their own thoughts, terrified of what they've become. And through it all, they're still obsessing over you, still watching you, still unable to understand why you're thriving while they're dying inside. The desperation led to exposure. They started acting erratically, started saying things that didn't make sense, started behaving in ways that made people question their sanity. The mask they wore for society started slipping. People who once respected them are now concerned. People who once trusted them are now suspicious. The reputation they were trying to protect by silencing you is crumbling anyway, because of their own actions. Here's something dark they're dealing with now, something they never anticipated. When you invite certain entities into your life for malicious purposes, they don't just leave when you're done with them. They attach, they feed, they grow stronger. Your enemies are walking around with spiritual parasites draining them of life force. Entities they called upon to attack you decided the summoner was a better host, weaker, more vulnerable, more accessible. These entities are feeding on their fear, their anxiety, their regret, their hatred. Every negative emotion makes the entity stronger and the host weaker. It's a parasitic relationship that will eventually consume them completely if they don't get proper help. But here's the sick irony. The only people who could help them remove these attachments are the kind of powerful spiritual workers who would never attack someone like you in the first place. The kind who operate in light, the kind who would look at what they've done and refuse to help them until they made serious amends, so they're stuck. Literally stuck with demonic attachments they invited in, stuck with entities feeding off their life force, stuck with spiritual contracts they don't know how to break. They're deteriorating faster than they realize. Health issues that doctors can't explain, accidents that seem statistically improbable, losses that feel targeted. This is what happens when you become a host to darkness. You meanwhile defeated the same entities they're now hosting. You faced that darkness and transmuted it. You looked those demons in the eye and said no. You had the spiritual strength to reject what they willingly invited in. That's the difference between you and them. That's why you're free, and they're bound. That's why you're ascending and they're descending. So here we are. The story comes full circle. The war that started in secret is ending in revelation. The attacks that came in darkness are being exposed in light. The hatred that seemed so powerful is revealed as pathetically weak. They're facing their ending now. The ending they wrote when they decided to attack you. The ending they signed up for when they underestimated your protection. The ending they guaranteed when they ignored every warning to stop. Some of them are dealing with mental collapse. The anxiety and depression they wanted for you became their reality. The confusion they tried to curse you with became their daily experience. The prison they built for you became their permanent residence. Some of them are dealing with physical consequences, the stress manifesting as illness, the darkness manifesting as disease, the karma manifesting as chronic pain and deterioration. Some of them are dealing with social consequences. People are noticing their behavior, questioning their choices, distancing themselves from the darkness that's becoming too obvious to ignore. Some of them are dealing with spiritual consequences. The entities they called upon are collecting payment. The practitioners they hired are demanding more than money. The forces they invoked are showing them exactly what darkness really costs. And you're free. Finally, completely, absolutely free. Free from their influence, free from their manipulation, free from their energy, free from the confusion about why things were so hard, free from the weight of their darkness. You understand now. You see clearly now. You know exactly what happened and why you had to walk the path you walked. Every struggle makes sense. Every hard moment has purpose. Every tear you cried watered the seeds of who you were becoming. They judged a book by its cover. They saw the outside and thought they understood the inside. They saw your gentleness and assumed weakness. They saw your kindness and assumed foolishness. They saw your silence and assumed defeat. They never opened the book. They never read the chapters. They never understood the story being written. If they had, they would have seen the truth. They would have seen the warnings. They would have seen that the information in that book could have saved their life. But they didn't. So here we are. You're standing in your power while they're falling apart. You're walking in your purpose while they're lost in consequence. You're living in your truth while they're drowning in their lies. The war is over. You won. Not because you fought back with their weapons, not because you matched their darkness, but because you stayed in your light, because you trusted your protection, because you believed in your purpose, even when everything seemed designed to make you doubt it. You are the chosen one, not because you're better than others, not because you're special in the way ego defines special, but because you were chosen for a specific mission that required specific strength, and you have that strength. You've proven it. You've embodied it. You've become it. They shouldn't have judged the book by its cover. The information in it could have saved their life, but they made their choice. They wrote their ending. They sealed their fate. And you're just beginning. The best chapters are still being written. The greatest moments are still ahead. The fullest expression of your power is still emerging. This is your story. This is your victory. This is your testimony. Stand in it. Own it. Live it. Because chosen one, you didn't just survive the war. You transformed because of it. You evolved through it. You became unstoppable in it. And that's the truth they can never change.